Darkness clung to the room like a shroud. A lone figure hunched over a glowing screen, bathed in its eerie light. Mason, a wordsmith of the macabre, reveled in the shadows. His fingers danced across the keyboard, spinning tales of terror that chilled his readers to the bone. He lived for the shivers, the gasps, the sleepless nights his stories evoked. Mason's small apartment was his sanctuary, his haven, his chamber of horrors. Bookshelves lined the walls, crammed with paperbacks and hardcovers, each a testament to his love for the macabre. His desk, cluttered with notebooks and pens, was his altar, where his darkest thoughts took shape. He was about to find out how wrong he was. Mason's latest creation was his most terrifying yet. A story so chilling, so visceral, that even he felt a shiver run down his spine as he typed the final words. He titled it The Whispering Void, a name that seemed to slither off the screen and into his mind. With a mix of trepidation and excitement, he uploaded the story to his online platform. Almost instantly, the response was overwhelming. But amidst the praise, a different kind of message began to surface. Mason's apartment, once a sanctuary of creativity, began to feel different. A subtle shift in atmosphere, a prickling at the back of his neck. He dismissed it as exhaustion, the price of his newfound fame. His latest story, The Whispering Void, was a runaway success. Mason felt invincible, his words holding sway over an ever-growing audience. He didn't realize his words were doing more than captivating listeners. They were weaving a bridge between worlds. The shadows in his apartment seemed to deepen, taking on shapes that writhed at the edge of his vision. He was a man possessed, driven by a force he couldn't comprehend. Across the city, listeners huddled in the darkness, their headphones a lifeline to Mason's chilling tales. The stories, once a source of thrilling escapism, began to seep into their reality. Objects moved inexplicably, misplaced items turning up in impossible locations. Rational minds struggled to dismiss the growing unease, attributing it to overactive imaginations or tricks of the light. But deep down, a primal fear took root. Mason reveled in the feedback, the terrified messages fueling his creativity. He didn't see the fear in their words, the genuine terror bleeding through their messages. Mason began noticing odd occurrences during his recordings. Strange clicks and pops in the audio, faint whispers that disappeared upon playback. He attributed it to technical glitches, the price of his makeshift home studio. One night, as he was recording the climax of his latest story, the lights in his apartment flickered violently. His computer screen went haywire, lines of text replaced by garbled symbols that seemed to writhe and pulsate. Then, a voice, raspy and chillingly real, whispered through his headphones. What if his stories were more than just fiction? Mason tried to ignore the growing unease, the creeping suspicion that something was terribly wrong. He told himself it was just stress, the pressure of his newfound success. But the messages from his listeners kept coming, each one more disturbing than the last. Fans described vivid nightmares, their dreams invaded by the creatures he wrote about. His inbox became a chronicle of escalating terror, a testament to the darkness he had unleashed. Mason's once comforting writing space now felt oppressive. The air, heavy with an unseen presence. The lines between his stories and his reality were blurring. Across the city, in homes bathed in the eerie glow of phone screens, the stories were transforming from entertainment to torment. Listeners who had once eagerly awaited each new installment now found themselves dreading the darkness. A young woman, engrossed in Mason's latest tale, felt a cold breath on her neck despite being alone in her apartment. A teenage boy, listening to the whispering void on his headphones, saw his bedroom door creak open slowly, revealing not the familiar hallway, but a swirling vortex of shadows. The stories once confined to the digital realm were breaking free. The barrier between fiction and reality, once thought impenetrable, had become as fragile as glass. And now that darkness was spreading. Mason received an email from a frantic listener, a young mother named Sarah. She described how her infant son had been inexplicably drawn to the corner of his nursery, his tiny hand reaching out to something unseen. Her message was accompanied by a chilling audio recording. In the background, the soft murmur of Mason's voice could be heard, reading from the whispering void, and then a child's scream, piercing and filled with an unholy terror that sent shivers down Mason's spine. He had to find a way before the darkness he unleashed consumed everything in its path. The barrier between worlds, once sturdy and impenetrable, had crumbled. Mason's words, imbued with his darkest fears and anxieties, had acted as an incantation, a beacon to entities lurking just beyond the veil of reality. They seeped through the cracks in the digital ether, drawn to the terror his stories evoked in his listeners. These were not the monsters of myth and legend, not the easily recognizable ghouls and goblins of campfire tales. They were whispers in the static, shadows that writhed at the edge of perception, cold spots that lingered long after the source of the chill had vanished. They invaded homes through earbuds and speakers, slipping past firewalls and security systems, as intangible and unstoppable as a virus. Mason, oblivious to the full extent of the horror he had wrought, continued to weave his tales. The hauntings escalated. What began as subtle disturbances, objects moving, whispers in the dark, fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures, transformed into full-blown assaults on the senses. Homes became battlegrounds, the familiar and comforting warping into something sinister and menacing. Walls bled ink-black stains that spread like a virus. Electronics flickered erratically, possessed by an unseen force that whispered through speakers and crackled across screens. The fabric of reality itself seemed to fray at the edges. Panic spread through the city like wildfire. Social media, once abuzz with praise for Mason's chilling tales, became a digital graveyard of fear and desperation. Listeners, bound together by their shared terror, reached out into the void, seeking answers, solace, anything to alleviate the suffocating dread that had become their new reality. Conspiracy theories ran rampant, blaming everything from government experiments to alien invasions. Religious leaders preached of end times, of demons unleashed upon the earth. But through it all, a single, terrifying truth began to emerge. The The stories were responsible. Mason's words had opened a Pandora's box of horrors, and now there seemed to be no closing it. The city, once a vibrant hub of life and energy, transformed into a ghost town. The weight of his creation pressed down on Mason, suffocating him. His once beloved sanctuary, his apartment, now felt like a tomb, the silence punctuated by the incessant buzzing of his phone. He was a prisoner in his own home, trapped by the fear he had unleashed. Sleep was a distant memory, his nights haunted by the faces of his listeners, their eyes wide with terror. His words had become instruments of torment, and he, the unwitting conductor of this symphony of fear. He had to stop this, to sever the connection between his stories and the horrors they had unleashed. But how? How do you unwrite a nightmare, silence the whispers that have already taken root in the minds of thousands? Section 2. Severing the connection. Frantically, Mason scrolled through the messages flooding his inbox, searching for a pattern, a clue, anything that could help him understand what he had done, how to undo it. He had stumbled into a realm he didn't understand, tapped into a power he couldn't control, and now he was desperate to find a way out. He immersed himself in ancient lore, poring over dusty tomes on demonology, cryptography, anything that might offer a glimmer of hope. He researched ancient rituals, desperate incantations, anything that promised to banish the entities he had unwittingly summoned. He was like a man possessed, driven by a desperate hope that he could somehow repair the damage he had done. He considered taking down his stories, silencing his channel, but he knew it was too late. The words were out there, etched into the digital ether, their power amplified with every listen, every share. Deleting the source wouldn't erase the echoes, wouldn't silence the whispers that now haunted the city. He had to fight fire with fire, story with story. He had to craft a narrative so powerful, so compelling, that it would undo the damage he had done, sever the connection he had forged between his world and the realm of nightmares he had unleashed. Section 3. A Desperate Plea. With trembling hands, Mason began to write. He poured every ounce of his fear, his guilt, his desperate hope into his words, crafting a narrative that was both a confession and a plea for forgiveness. He titled it The Reckoning, a story born of desperation and fueled by hope. A desperate plea whispered into the void, a prayer for redemption. He hit publish, and the world held its breath. Section 1. Echoes of the Nightmare. The silence after the reckoning was heavier than any Mason had ever experienced. Days turned into nights, each hour an eternity as he waited. The messages from his listeners slowed to a trickle, then ceased. The digital screams were replaced by an unsettling quiet. Slowly, life began to resume its rhythm. The city, scarred but not broken, emerged from the shadows. Section 2. A Legacy of Whispers. He abandoned his writing, haunted by the terror he had inflicted. The digital applause now rang hollow, a mocking reminder of the darkness he had unleashed. Messages from listeners credited the reckoning with their survival. They spoke of the story's power, to banish shadows. But the door he had opened could never be fully closed. Mason's story served as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the power of words.